Alright, welcome back to Deciduous Plant ID. We're on to the next set of letters and families, and let's get going. Okay, next family is Cupressaceae, and there are two members of the Cupressaceae that are deciduous, because most members are evergreen conifers. So the two plants I'm going to be talking to you about, this one being the first, used to be in Taxodiaceae, but now they've lumped them into Cupressaceae. Long story, long rant there, I'll spare you the details. Anyway, you gotta look at this really cool plant. This is Metasequoia streptoboides. So keep saying that multiple times and you'll eventually get it. I always misspell it in every exam, so don't feel bad if you miss it on your midterm or final. But anyway, practice, practice, practice. So the Dawn Redwood. So this particular selection is called Gold Rush. So it's a golden leaf form of the Dawn Redwood, which is quite attractive and pretty easy to identify, and you can't miss it. Of course, it's bare sticks in the wintertime, but now as it's emerging in spring, the feather really, they're like feathers really. The feather-like leaves are quite evident, quite soft in texture, and a beautiful, beautiful tree. So this particular one that we're looking at is still quite young, and one diagnostic trait it has, well, I shouldn't say diagnostic trait, it's more of a habit that it has are at the very base of the tree. Yeah, can't really see. Anyway, we often refer to this tree as the armpit tree because the crown of the base of the tree, there at the crown, have these crotches that kind of remind people of armpits. Or as these branches develop here, as this matures, there often is a kind of a deep impression there that kind of gives a suggestion of an armpit. So that might help you out in terms of identifying this tree. Other than that, really, the leaves, the soft feathery leaves are a giveaway. So let's check out the next member of Cupressaceae that's deciduous. Okay, next on the list is Taxodium, the bald cypress. So again, one of the few deciduous conifers that we'll encounter in the landscape, and here it's just leafing out, and it's kind of odd when you look at it. You think it'd be evergreen, but then it completely loses its needles or branches, I should say. They're not needles. Cupressaceae, remember? So beautiful form. This particular selection is one called Shawnee Brave, so it's not the straight disticum that you're responsible for, but again, different from the Metasequoia in that these are actually, they're not feather-like, they're more like branchlets that are formed. And the highlight of this tree is its habit. It's actually quite, you can see it's in our parking island here, so it's very adaptable to very harsh conditions. And in autumn, the fall color is actually quite stunning. So it's a very useful landscape plant, and one that's often overlooked. So yeah, worth studying a little bit more. Alright, so we're walking westward, and this is our kitchen garden. So almost all of the edible plants, are are growing here, and it takes us to our next family, which is the Ericaceae, and this is the genus Vaccinium, and you probably might know Vaccinium. Here, let's look at the developing fruit. That should give you a hint, yeah? Blueberries, yep. So Ericaceae, very distinct, very large family, both evergreen and deciduous. So of course we're focusing on deciduous right now. And Ericaceae, of course, is known for those urn-shaped flowers, which this clearly displays. So of course, many different types of blueberries. There are deciduous rhododendrons, azaleas that are in this family. And so yeah, pretty distinct. You can see we should have a good crop of blueberries here if we can keep the birds away. So, yep, Alright, our next fabulous member of the Fabaceae is this tree here. Pretty easy to identify in its beautiful cordate heart-shaped leaves. So this is the genus Ursus. These are the redbuds, and pretty easy to identify in the landscape. I think they're not super large trees. The heart-shaped leaves definitely give it away. It's this perfect heart. I mean, stay still. There. Anyway, yeah. See, it's love. Anywho, so how I identify Ursus in the landscape is basically the purple tree with the white stems that are still quite evident, and for some reason it seems really consistent to me. Every time I'm looking at a tree from a distance, I'm seeing the kind of ghostly white stems amidst the purple foliage. So it's done blooming now, but it has these little axillary pink flowers with the kind of quintessential pea-like flowers, but it's the foliage just gives it away. So there's the purple form. This is forest pansy, and then there are gold leaf forms, and then there's ones that are gold with the beautiful reddish new growth, which is super pretty. And also too, if you look up in the sky, the pattern and the branch arrangement is also kind of a giveaway as well. So alternate leaf arrangement, but yes, you can't miss and also not fall in love with the beautiful heart-shaped leaves of Ursus. Alright, this species is not on your list, but the genus is. So this is the genus Janista, and this one is Janista atlantensis, or the Mount Etna broom. So it basically looks like a giant Scotch broom on steroids, and basically looks like it. But when it's in flower, yes, it's yellow. It basically looks like a Scotch broom. I've gotten a lot of crap about, like, Riz, what the hell? Why are you growing Scotch broom? Until they actually see this in flower and see that it's different and smell how, like, it smells amazing. So it's not blooming right now, obviously, but in a few weeks I'll try and show it to you. But it's quite beautiful, actually, here with the light. When trained properly, it's very effective in a drought-tolerant garden, the way we have it here with the lavender and the agaves and the apuntia underneath it. So I just wish it was a little stronger, that we didn't have to stake it, because it looks kind of tacky. But it's quite beautiful. So yeah, a tree Scotch broom, but quite pretty, and it smells awesome. So while we're here, you can see our McMiniman struck over there. I have to show you the desert garden. So we have our own little super bloom going on here with the California poppy that just seeded. I swear I did not plant a single seed of this. And it's looking fantastic. And agaves that you see here, this is agave ovatifolia, also known as the whale tongue agave. And we have 3 of them. And later in the season we'll have a Parodia here, or Jashneria. There's a Mexican Mahonia there, and some other fun stuff. And that's Yucca rostrata, which is fantastic. And there's a member of Cupressaceae, but right there, the Cypress. So, cool stuff. Alright, so we've got another fab for you to look at. So in full bloom now is the Wisteria. So you have 2 species of Wisteria on your list, and this is one of them. In full bloom now, it's just starting to take over, and we basically want to have it run all along there. So it'll be a few years, but we've already had this underground for a few years. So here's what the base looks like. This was I think I got this as a 2-gallon plant about 3-4 years ago. So it's fairly quick to grow, quite woody, but it's looking spectacular right now. So this is a form of Wisteria floribunda. So on your list you have floribunda and chinensis. So the difference between the 2 species, in general, Floribunda tends to have these very long, gosh, are these panicles? I'm trying to remember the terminology. But yes, they're quite long and elegant, very beautiful, whereas chinensis, excuse me, was it chinensis? Chinensis, I can't remember. Here, I'm gonna cheat. I have your list. It is sinensis. So sinensis. Motorcycles. Okay. So sinensis tends to be much shorter and tighter in terms of its flower inflorescences. So this particular Floribunda, again, this is Wisteria floribunda, a form of it. This is a variety, a selection called Black Dragon, and if you look closely, it's a double flower form. It is so cool. So let's look at it more in natural light here. So it's quite unusual, quite beautiful, and again, Floribunda. And someone nipped out. Oh, dang it, people. Anyway, here, let's caress the inflorescence. It's super beautiful, and again, quite vigorous. So wisteria, you have to be very careful with planting in the landscape, because people see it like this and want it, and you have to tell them, you know, you better have a gardener that's gonna stay on top of it, or you know, learn to prune it, you know, yourself, because this takes a lot of work. And just trying to get it to flower and getting it to do what you want it to do. Oh my god, look at this. It's even looking awesome. So right through there, it's getting enough light to even throw out the flowers underneath the breezeway here. So yes, wisteria, beautiful plant, beautiful vine. I've seen it trained up as trees as well, but they do need care. This is not a low maintenance plant by any means, but so beautiful. All right, we're walking from the south side of the hotel, and have these two trees that I want to show you to showcase the next family, which is the family Fabaceae. So this is the genus Fagus, aka the beech. So this is a selection of a purple beech, so Fagus sylvatica, and we have two types, or two cultivars here, and they're a columnar selection. So you have a kind of a lighter green selection than the purple form. So these tend to get really large, massive even, but it's nice to have these selections as we walk through the pathway here. I'll show you another example. It's nice that we have something that's more columnar and something more manageable, because these can get quite large. Now, to identify the genus, so we have several genera in Fabaceae that I'll discuss and talk about, but Fagus, especially Fagus sylvatica, is pretty easy to identify. It tends to have some pubescence in the new growth here, very glossy, shiny leaves. And if you look closely, you see the hirsute, is that the term? Yeah. The very minute hairs there along the edges of the leaves, and the pubescence too. Yeah, pretty much concentrated along the edges there. So pretty easy to recognize and identify. And also, to me, the texture of the leaf, you see the kind of puckering there in the foliage as it develops. Helps me identify Fagus, but also from a distance, when you have foliage that kind of gets backlit like this, it's easy, the gloss tends to kind of be accentuated by it. So that's what helps me identify Fagus in the landscape. So another member of the Fabaceae, probably one of the most recognizable, is sorry, I just got a signal for a low bat. Are the Quercus, and I think that they should have their own family, Quercus or something like that. But anyway, unfortunately, I don't have any of the oaks that you have on your list, but we have several hybrids, and this one I want to point out because, again, many different types of oaks, they get super huge, super large, but there are selections that are nice and upright and fairly narrow and more user-friendly in the landscape. So I believe this selection is called Skinny Jeans, and again selected and developed to be more upright and narrow, so it's more manageable and to scale in urban landscape. So let's look at the leaves closely here. It's again quintessential oak leaf. You know, you'll see the different lobes and the different species and the different degrees of lobing that exist between the different species. So it's worth going through your notes, and basically what's great about studying Quercus is by the leaf. I mean, you can just, you know, discreetly, you know, pick a leaf from one and a few and others, and basically just compare them, you know, line them up and identify them, because that's the best way to distinguish the different species. So it's tricky because there are a lot of hybrids like this one that kind of, you know, resemble, like, oh, it could be this or that, you know, but if you review your notes, it's pretty easy, and it becomes a process of elimination at a certain point when you can identify the different species of Quercus on your list. So this is most likely, it could be a hybrid, but it's very similar to Quercus palustris, and of the various oaks out there, I think it is the skinniest in terms of its leaves here, because, you know, a lot of them have different shapes, different lobes, but here the lobes are quite deep, so it's I just think of it as the skinniest of the different oaks that we generally study. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, another prehistoric tree in its own family, the Ginkgoaceae, and of course it is Ginkgo biloba. So pretty easy to identify with this very distinct leaf shape, which I call a duck feet shape. So pretty easy to tell. Various cultivars, some dwarf forms, some various selections, and of course a dioecious plant, so male and female plants exist. Typically we prefer the males in the landscape because they do not drop the fruit, which can be very unpleasant in terms of smell. So most clones and selections for the landscape are males. So yeah, long petiole, very distinct shape, like I mentioned, beautiful golden fall color on pretty much all the cultivars, I think. And yeah, neat plant. Okay, let's talk about the family Grossulariaceae, and it's pretty easy to remember the family. There's pretty much only one member that we're going to talk about, and it's this one. This is the genus Ribes. So this is Ribes sanguineum, also known as our native red flowering currant, and it's finished flowering, but again, very now it's just a foliage that you can identify, but you can look for the pendulous racemes that once existed that are no longer there, and occasionally you will see fruit developing, but very distinctive leaf, again kind of maple-like, and of course not maple because the leaf arrangement is alternate. And let's look at the whole plant. And this time of year it's pretty full. It's finished blooming, and now it's putting its energy into this year's growth that will eventually be flowers for next winter to early spring. So for me to identify Ribes sanguineum, it has a distinct scent to the foliage, but the habit usually gives it away. I look for the spent blooms. And Ribes is also the same genus as gooseberries and currants. So a lot of edible members of this of the family, of course, the edible currant, which I can show you because we have some. Okay, let's look at another ribes here. So this is your fruiting currant. So not quite ripe yet, but you can see again pendulous racemes like you would see in Ribes sanguineum, and the foliage too is again very similar, quite distinct, lobed. And let's look at another member next door, which has suffered from a terrible caterpillar. So look at that, it's awful. They've just skeletonized this thing. Anyway, these are gooseberries, you guys. So you can see the fruit developing, and again, foliage here. These actually have spines. Oh my gosh, those look vicious. But again, very similar in terms of growth habit for this genus. Okay, we are on to our next family, which is the Hemophyllum. So let's start with the genus Hemophyllum. So this shrub, very distinct in its foliage, and what you want to look for are the deeply impressed venations that you will notice. So it's slightly pubescent, but the foliage really gives it away, and I'll show you different examples and I'll compare it to other members of the family so you'll be able to recognize it. So Hemophyllum, the highlight for Hemophyllum is in the winter when it does flower. It's fragrant, leafless of course because it's deciduous, and quite a beautiful winter shrub. But during the growing season, it makes a very attractive shrub. This one's still quite young, but it takes on a beautiful vase shape once it's mature. But it's also very trainable in terms of how you can train it. You can have it espaliered, you can train it into a tree, so fairly versatile. And so because it's not flowering, actually, made a liar out of me. There's a little flower there. But what you want to look for are the persistent sepals that remain once the petals have fallen off. So the petals really are the little yellow filaments there for this particular variety, but you will see these persistent calyxes that should be present. And so yeah, so let's look at some of the other members of this family. Okay, so we're back in the parking lot, and our next member of Hemophyllum is this tree here. This is Parodia. So Parodia, think parrot, like the bird, and I've brought in a leaf of the Hemophyllum that we looked at earlier to compare it with the foliage of Parodia. This is Parodia persica, and it gets to be a large tree. And so basically to distinguish the two genera, just in case you're wondering, okay, I recognize the leaves and I know it's Hemophyllum, but which genus? Pretty much Hemophyllum is gonna almost always be a large shrub, multi-trunked, sometimes single, but your Parodia is usually a tall tree. Sometimes multi-trunk, sometimes the standard like this one, but otherwise they're going to be very similar. But also Parodia will not have those persistent calyxes that we looked at with the Hemophyllum. So that's another diagnostic trait to look for to compare the two. Alright, so the smallest leaf member of this particular family, Hemophyllum, probably has to be this species. This is the genus Coreopsis, and this is Coreopsis passiflora, and as you can see, again, look at that, the wonderful and distinct deep venation that exists. So not quite as large or as impressed as the Hemophyllum or the Parodia, but again, very distinct, often has kind of a blushes pink new growth when they're first leafing out. But again, there's the deeply impressed veins are so attractive and so beautiful on this particular plant. So still quite young. And then another, its larger relative is Coreopsis spicata, or spicata, however you want to pronounce it. But that's more upright and certainly looks like Hemophyllum in terms of its growth habit. But the foliage kind of gives it away. It's a little bit more defined in its venation. Okay, our next family and the next genus is quite popular and probably the most well-known of the group, and those are the hydrangeas. Let's have a look. This is Hydrangea macrophylla. So macro meaning large, phylla meaning leaf, the big leaf glossy hydrangea that grandma has. So you'll typically see these with the big light blue balls, mop heads, that you just can't miss when they're in full bloom. But so this is its general habit, and you can see the buds developing there. So this is the type of hydrangea that you do not want to prune severely in spring, because these flower, as you can see, on second year wood, not on first year wood. So hopefully at some point you'll study hydrangeas more closely and learn about their pruning regimens. So this one's pretty easy to tell, the macrophyllas, because of the large leaves. Typically they're much larger than this, but super glossy and can't miss it. So let's compare this to another popular class of hydrangeas in the landscape. This is Hydrangea paniculata. This is a very popular type of hydrangea that's just all the rage now. There's so many varieties, short, tall. They're mostly pink, white, and they have probably the most delicious plant names, or variety, cultivar names I should say, or I should say trade names, that are of course aimed at selling. So they have like strawberry, sundae, whatever, icicle, popsicle, whatever. So this type of hydrangea is one that you can actually prune quite severely and have it flower the same year, because it blooms on current year's wood. So here we pruned it back, but not too far back. Some growers were actually even coppice this, leaving just a few inches above the ground. And of course all these young shoots developing will produce a flower head. So it's quite useful in the landscape. This particular one is called Limelight, and it's probably the most popular of the paniculatas. And so it doesn't look like much right now, but it's super healthy, very vigorous, easy to grow, and very useful in the landscape. And of course when it's in flower, everyone wants it. So clients are like, we'll ask for hedges of this. It's obscene, but but you can. They're that resilient and that available and that reliable, which is key to selecting plants in the landscape. Now, if there was a shrub that I would recommend to a beginning gardener, it would most likely be Hydrangea quercifolia, the oak leaf hydrangea. And it's pretty easy to identify in the landscape because of the shape of its leaves. So deep lobes, highly textural, and you can see the buds here, they're just about to flower. There are so many different types of quercifolia, and short ones, tall ones, double flowered ones. We pretty much almost have it all here at Anderson School, but you can see its habit. So this particular selection, sorry, I'm distracted by this iris, I have to smell it. So beautiful. Okay, focus. This one is hydrangea. I believe this is PG or Peewee or one of those. Anyway, it's one of the shorter growing forms of quercifolia. And what's wonderful about this plant is not only is it very adaptable, it's quite a beautiful plant. So, of course, the flowers are born in beautiful panicles. The foliage and also the fall color is exceptional on oak leaf hydrangeas.